February 1959. Deep in the frozen Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, 9 experienced hikers were spending the night on an isolated mountainside. Outside, the temperature was brutally cold. Inside their tent were boots, warm clothing, food, and everything they needed to survive the night. But sometime after darkness fell, something happened. Something serious enough that all 9 suddenly abandoned their shelter. When rescuers later found the tent, much of their equipment was still inside: boots, warm clothing, food, personal belongings. And investigators concluded that sections of the tent had been cut from within. Outside, footprints led away from the campsite and into the frozen wilderness. None of the 9 hikers returned alive. Some died from hypothermia. Others suffered severe injuries. And more than 60 years later, one question still defines the mystery of Dyatlov Pass. Why would 9 experienced hikers leave their only shelter and walk into a deadly winter night? The story began in January 1959. The expedition was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. Most of the group were young, experienced hikers connected to the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Their goal was an ambitious winter journey through the remote northern Ural Mountains. Originally, 10 people set out, but during the expedition, one member, Yuri Yudin, became ill and was forced to turn back. That decision saved his life. The remaining 9 continued deeper into the wilderness. They photographed their journey. They kept diaries. They skied through deep snow, endured difficult weather, and spent nights in freezing conditions. Their final photographs show an expedition that, despite the hardship, appeared completely normal. There was no obvious warning of what was about to happen. On February 1st, the hikers reached the slopes of Kholat Syakhl. Weather conditions were getting worse. Instead of continuing down into the forest, the group established their tent on the exposed mountainside. They cut into the snow-covered slope to create a level platform. Then they settled in for the night. And sometime after that, the story disappears into darkness. There were no survivors, no eyewitnesses, only the evidence they left behind. When the group failed to return as expected, concern began to grow. A search operation was eventually launched. Then rescuers reached the campsite. The tent was still there, but the hikers were gone. Inside were many of the things they should have needed to survive outside: boots, warm clothing, food, and personal belongings. Investigators determined that cuts in the tent had been made from the inside. Tracks led downhill from the campsite toward the forest, and the condition in which the hikers had left was deeply troubling. Some were not properly dressed for the weather. Some lacked adequate footwear. These were experienced hikers. They understood the danger of exposure. They knew that abandoning shelter in extreme cold could be fatal, yet something apparently made leaving the tent seem like the safer choice. Searchers eventually discovered the first bodies near a large cedar tree at the edge of the forest. There was evidence that a small fire had been made nearby. Other members of the group were found between the cedar tree and the abandoned tent. Their position suggested that some may have attempted to return uphill, but 4 hikers were still missing. They would not be found until months later when the snow began to melt. Their bodies were discovered deeper in a ravine, and the autopsies added another disturbing layer to the mystery. Several members of the group had died from hypothermia, but others had suffered serious injuries, including major trauma to the chest or skull. Now investigators faced an even more difficult question. What could have driven the entire group from the tent and led to such a strange sequence of deaths? Over the decades, theories multiplied. Some suggested secret Soviet military activity. Others pointed to reports of unusual lights in the region. There were theories involving weapons tests, an attack by outsiders, extreme winds, infrasound, and eventually, UFOs, secret experiments, and even unknown creatures entered the story. The mystery grew larger than the evidence itself, but there was a problem. Investigators found no convincing evidence that another group had attacked the hikers. There was no solid evidence of a mysterious creature, and no verified evidence demonstrated that a secret weapon had killed the expedition. One explanation was far less dramatic: an avalanche. For years, many people rejected that possibility. The campsite did not appear to have been struck by the kind of massive avalanche most people imagined. The tent was not buried beneath an enormous field of snow, and the slope seemed too gentle. There was another problem. The hikers had apparently been inside the tent for some time before the emergency occurred. If the slope was unstable, why didn't it collapse immediately? Those questions helped keep the mystery alive for decades. But modern researchers eventually returned to Dyatlov Pass with a different idea. In 2021, researchers proposed that the hikers may not have faced a huge avalanche at all. Instead, they suggested a smaller slab avalanche. When the group cut into the slope to create a flat area for their tent, they may have weakened part of the snowpack. Strong winds could then have continued depositing snow above them. Hours later, a compact slab of snow may have broken loose. Such an event could have struck or threatened the tent, injured some of the hikers, and convinced the group that remaining on the slope was too dangerous. Suddenly, cutting their way out of the tent begins to make more sense. They may have believed they needed to move downhill immediately, toward the forest, toward protection. But they were stepping into darkness, in extreme cold, without enough clothing. Later observations in the region strengthened the possibility that slab avalanches can occur around the area. It does not prove exactly what happened that night, and it cannot explain every decision made by every member of the group, but it provides a plausible chain of events without requiring anything supernatural. If this explanation is close to the truth, their final hours may have been terrifyingly simple. Snow threatens or strikes the tent. The hikers escape. They move downhill toward the forest. A fire is started. Some may already be injured. Some search for better shelter. Others attempt to return to the tent. But the cold is relentless. Their clothing is inadequate. Their strength begins to disappear. And one by one, the mountain wins. Today, we know far more about Dyatlov Pass than investigators did in 1959. We know where the tent stood. We know where the hikers were found. We have their photographs, their diaries, their autopsy reports, and decades of investigation. Modern science has even given us a credible explanation for why they may have abandoned their shelter. But there is one thing we will never have: a survivor. No one can tell us exactly what those 9 hikers heard that night, what they saw, what they believed was happening, or what made them decide that stepping into the frozen darkness was safer than remaining inside their tent. So what really happened at Dyatlov Pass? Was a slab avalanche the beginning of a desperate chain of events that ended in tragedy? Or is there still a piece of that frozen night that we have never completely understood? Leave your theory in the comments and subscribe to Chronicle Dark for more true mysteries hidden in the shadows of history.